The British Expeditionary Force began arriving in France on September 4, 1939, with the main bulk of the force disembarking between September 9th and September 14th, 1939. Most troops and equipment landed at Cherbourg and Nantes between September 9th and September 14th, 1939. By the end of September 1939, over 150,000 soldiers and 25,000 vehicles had been transported across the Channel to the ports of Cherbourg and Nantes. Their primary goal was to defend the Belgian border with France. The Battle of Dunkirk was the climax of the Battle of France, which began on May 10, 1940. Nazi Germany launched Val Gelb, Case Yellow, an invasion of the Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg. While the Allied High Command expected a repeat of the Schlieffen Plan from World War I being a primary thrust through central Belgium, the Germans executed a daring alternative. They sent their main armoured force, Group Kleist, through the impassable Ardennes forest in southern Belgium and Luxembourg. By May 13th, German panzers crossed the Meuse River at Sedan, punching a massive hole in the French lines. They raced westward across northern France towards the English Channel, reaching the coast at Abbeville on May 20th. This sickle cut maneuver effectively trapped the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, the remnants of the Belgian Army and the French First Army in a pocket. Cut off from their primary supply bases and the main French forces to the south, the Allies were forced to retreat towards the last remaining deep-water port available to them, Dunkirk. As German panzers closed in on the port from the west and the south, Hitler approved a halt order on May 24th, stopping the tanks for 3 days. While the military evacuation is famous, the lesser-known refugee crisis at Dunkirk in 1940 was a scene of desperation. Hundreds of thousands of Belgian and French civilians fled the German blitzkrieg, clogging the narrow roads leading to the coast. Families pushed carts filled with their life's belongings, moving alongside retreating soldiers under the constant threat of aerial strafing. Dunkirk was considered to be the only safe place to flee to, as it had not yet been captured by the Germans. Upon reaching Dunkirk, these refugees found the city in ruins. Unlike the British troops, there were no organized rescue fleets waiting for them. Most were trapped between the advancing Nazi panzer divisions and the sea. They sought shelter in cellars and bombed out buildings, facing severe shortages of food and water. To maximize human capacity on the retreating vessels, the British Expeditionary Force was forced to abandon virtually all its heavy equipment on the French beaches and surrounding countryside. The losses were catastrophic. The British Army left behind approximately 64,000 vehicles, including trucks, ambulances and tanks, along with 2,500 artillery pieces, tens of thousands of automatic weapons and hundreds of thousands of tons of ammunition and fuel. Beaches became massive, surreal scrapyards of twisted metal. This total divestment stripped the British Army of its mechanized teeth, leaving the UK dangerously vulnerable to a German invasion. Rebuilding the nation's lost arsenal required an unprecedented, exhausting mobilization of domestic wartime industry. For the men trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk, the experience was defined by a total lack of cover. They were sitting ducks on a wide, flat expanse of sand. When the German Stuka dive bombers appeared, there was nowhere to hide. Men simply pressed themselves into the sand or waded deeper into the water, hoping the explosions would miss them. The soldiers formed long lines, called snakes, that reached out far into the surf. They stood for hours, sometimes days, in shoulder-deep water to stay ready for any boat that would approach. The men were exhausted, salt-burned, and often hadn't eaten a real meal in days. The air was thick with the black oily smoke from the burning fuel tanks nearby. It wasn't a scene of heroic action, but one of grim, silent waiting under constant threat of a death from the sky. As the situation on the beaches became desperate on May the 30th, the Admiralty realized that large warships could not get close enough to the shallow shore to rescue the thousands of men standing in the surf. In a move that defined the miracle of Dunkirk, the Ministry of Shipping requisitioned a mass of civilian vessels. These included wooden fishing trawlers, lifeboats and even private pleasure yachts. Here we see some of the fishing boats in the Cornish village of Polperro that might have participated in the rescue. Some Thames barges also participated. This fleet consisted of approximately 700 to 850 little ships, including Thames sailing barges, Dutch schuits, cargo boats, pleasure yachts, private motorboats and open lifeboats. Manned by civilian volunteers and naval ratings, they braved mines and constant Luftwaffe strafing. The journey across the English Channel was a desperate struggle for survival against constant aerial attacks. The crossing was a slow, grueling process that could take anywhere from 8 to over 20 hours, depending on the vessel and the route taken to avoid minefields. The rescue fleet was a massive, disorganized collection of ships, ranging from large Navy destroyers and merchant vessels to hundreds of small civilian boats. A vital factor during the journey was the weather. An unusual period of calm seas and light winds allowed even the smallest, overloaded boats to navigate the deep waters of the Channel, which would have been impossible in rougher conditions. As the British soldiers pulled away from the French coast, they were repeatedly targeted by German Stukas that dived from the clouds to drop bombs. The sea itself was a scene of destruction, covered in thick black oil and floating wreckage from ships that had been destroyed. They had to endure the sight of nearby vessels being hit and sinking into the cold water, while their own boat steered in sharp patterns to avoid being hit. Despite the constant noise of anti-aircraft fire and the violent shaking of the boats, many men were so exhausted from the days of fighting that they collapsed and slept where they stood. The narrow stretch of water offered no place to hide, leaving the men exposed to machine gun fire from the planes circling above. These small boats acted as a vital bridge, ferrying soldiers from the water's edge out to the larger destroyers waiting in deeper water. Without this civilian armada, the majority of the men on the beaches would have been captured. 53,823 men were saved on this day. May the 31st was the peak of the rescue. This was the most successful day, with 68,014 men evacuated. How happy these men must have been when they saw the British coastline appear on the horizon. Despite the carnage, 64,429 men reached England. On June the 2nd, the final British units were evacuated. The perimeter was now held exclusively by French troops of the 12th Motorized Infantry Division, who fought to allow their comrades to escape. On this day, 26,256 men were rescued. Because German forces controlled the coast between Dunkirk and Normandy, ships could not sail directly to other French ports. The rescued French soldiers were taken to the UK, then quickly ferried from southern English ports like Southampton back to northwest France, ports like Cherbourg and Brest, to rejoin the fight on the new front line. Following the chaotic evacuation of Dunkirk, the arrival of over 338,000 British and Allied troops at the south coast ports of England marked the beginning of one of the most complex logistic operations in British military history. The challenge then shifted to the rapid clearance of ports like Dover, Folkestone, Ramsgate, Margate and Sheerness to prevent a bottleneck that would leave the exhausted men vulnerable to Luftwaffe attacks. As the men disembarked, they were often in a state of extreme physical and psychological exhaustion. The primary goal of the authorities was to move them away from the coast as quickly as possible. Those requiring urgent medical attention were prioritized and moved to local emergency hospitals or redirected via special ambulance trains to inland facilities. While this staggering military defeat involved the loss of almost all heavy equipment, the survival of the professional army was hailed as the miracle of Dunkirk, providing the foundation for the eventual Allied return to Europe. The Dunkirk spirit emerged as a powerful cultural myth that transformed a crushing military defeat into a morale victory of national unity. It focused on the image of a people's war, where ordinary civilians in their small boats risked everything to save the professional army from certain destruction. This narrative was heavily fueled by Winston Churchill's rhetoric and BBC broadcasts, which emphasized British resilience and the refusal to surrender even when the odds were overwhelming. Instead of dwelling on the loss of France or the abandonment of equipment, the British public embraced the idea that the nation was most dangerous when its back was against the wall. This collective sense of stoicism and mucking in became a vital propaganda tool that sustained civilian morale during the subsequent Blitz and the lean years of the war. To this day, the phrase remains a shorthand for the British ability to remain calm and work together to overcome a seemingly hopeless crisis. The battle for Dunkirk and the fact that so many soldiers were rescued despite the German onslaught indeed has gone into history as the miracle of Dunkirk. Many units had been separated during the retreat. Military police and transport officers worked frantically to group men not necessarily by their original regiments, but by their immediate physical needs. At the key sites, the troops were met by members of the Women's Voluntary Service, WVS, and the Red Cross, who provided the first semblance of home, mugs of tea, sandwiches and cigarettes. The movement was characterized by a lack of formal scheduling. Trains were filled as soon as enough men reached the platform and dispatched immediately. Most soldiers had no idea where they were going. They were given post office postcards with pre-printed texts to send home, simply stating they were safe, as the telegraph lines were overwhelmed. The backbone of the repatriation was the British railway system. The Southern Railway in particular bore the brunt of all the traffic. A massive pool of rolling stock was created, drawing carriages from all over the country, the so-called dynamo trains. Between May the 27th and June the 4th, nearly 2,000 special trains were run. While the military tried to maintain order, the British public took the initiative along the railway lines. Word spread quickly about the returning Dunkirkers, and as trains slowed down at signals or stations, civilians lined the tracks. They threw packets of cigarettes, chocolate and newspapers through the open windows of the carriages. This spontaneous outpouring of support was a crucial factor in boosting the morale of a force that, despite the relief of being home, felt the heavy weight of a military defeat. The repatriation was not just a journey home, it was a race to reassemble a fighting force from the fragments that had survived the beaches. Thanks for watching, and to use an old phrase from my childhood, TTFN. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel.
Though for a time we say goodbye, don't let this moment distress you. I'll always bless you, my dear. We'll meet again, though not when, but I'm sure we'll meet again some brighter day. Keep shining through as you're so prone to do, till the golden sun drives every storm away, and I will just